Individually. So it's hard to be a black woman in America and not be touched in some way by mass incarceration. Even growing up in a relatively middle class family, my older brother went to prison and ultimately died in prison. And truly, as I look around me, I look around society and black and brown communities, we are all impacted in so many ways. And so for me personally, it became a calling and a mission to do something to fight mass incarceration. And my entry point into that conversation has been with children. It is clear that America's obsession with incarcerating black and brown America begins with black and brown children. And so I have devoted my life to representing children accused of delinquency and crime across the country, specifically in the District of Columbia, which is why I'm happy to be here today at Busboys and Poets, really bringing attention to this question. I have watched for over 26 years, the city that I love, I've watched it criminalize young black children. For just being kids, right? That does not mean that there isn't real crime in our city that we have to do something about, but we've got to get it right. It's really important that we engage in humane ways with that small percentage of the population that is committing crimes, right? Giving them the resources, the support, the mental health, the care, the vocation that they need. That's really important. And while it's important to work with that population of young people, it's equally important to make sure that we don't over-criminalize and over-police those children who aren't doing anything wrong. And so that's what my mission has been about. And that's why this question of mass incarceration is so incredibly important to me. Thank you for having me.
I myself, I feel that I've been affected by mass incarceration directly, due to the fact of my life experience, me being wrongfully convicted and accused since I was a child, 14 years old. My whole life has been attached to mass incarceration and wrongful convictions. I actually grew up in an era where mass incarceration was introduced to America. And it was during the same time of the crack epidemic. And I was just a victim of that. To actually be here today, my whole life has been based around my incarceration, my wrongful conviction. I don't know how else to live my life besides the good fight at this point. So, by me being affected by this directly is what I feel gives my life purpose today. It actually provides me with a purpose for me to move forward and speak about these different issues and try to change the system in any way possible if I can change somebody's heart, one person at a time. Me personally, I don't believe that the system is going to change anytime soon, but I feel like we can affect each individual heart by heart. And if you can start to change people's heart and the people that are actually making the rules, then you can have some type of effect on a system overall. I feel that it has affected me in a particular way where I don't know how to move forward without dealing with the topics that address mass incarceration, that address wrongful convictions. At this point, it provides a center for me in my life as far as for me to keep on navigating and moving forward. It's a negative that I made a positive in my life. And growing up in a time where it was introduced to America and actually living through all them different phases of my life, seeing how the drugs and over time until the actual day that we living in today, sometimes I question myself and ask like how and why I'm even still here. But I feel like through this nightmare, I was able to find a place for me in my life to actually have good cause. And coming from a background where I come from, not having a healthy and a strong family behind me, it was easy for them to put me in a position where I had no resources of help. And I just want to be that resource of help for someone that might be in a need like myself at some point and need that particular outlet, because when I was looking for them type of resources, they wasn't there. 28 years later, I've been out off of my incarceration, going on 12 years now. I spent 17 years inside on this incarceration, so I lived it. So it's basically my life story, and I'm just trying to make the best of a bad situation any way I can have. Due to the fact that I was exonerated, it puts me in a position where I have somewhat of a platform where I get to speak about it and people will listen. There's a lot of people who's being affected by this daily who have no voice, that people don't care about because it's not their family, they're not being affected by it. But the fact that I do have a platform and people can relate to me and want to listen to me, I feel like if I stop speaking, then I'm doing an injustice to so many people that need my help. So I have no choice but to live my life based around this purpose, or I'm just taking up space at this point. So with that said, I thank you guys for having me and keeping me alive in a good fight, and thinking about the people that have no voice and the people that are actually being affected by this, who are being victimized by this right now, that have no outside resources, that have no one to help them. And by us doing what we do, creates that little bit of help, a little bit of hope that somebody might reach back out for them. So with that said, I thank you guys for having me today.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I don't know if you could tell from that long pause. I'm a real call and response type of female. So good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight, despite the weather, to support the Impact of Mass Incarceration series that we have just launched today. Well, not today. This is the second day, but this week. We are so grateful for your support, for your presence, and we're hoping that you're able to get everything and more out of this discussion. I would just ask that this time you silence your phones so we don't have those dingings going off and everyone can be fully present in the moment. Don't you worry about the full dining service. It will continue being available even throughout the discussion. Marissa will be sure to come around, make sure everyone's taken care of. So if you need anything, just get her attention. It'll be sure to take care of you. A little bit more about the impact of mass incarceration. It's a call home to victims of the criminal justice system who have been taken from their communities and brought back years later to an unrecognizable place without the proper reentry tools. This series also aims to serve as a voice for those who are currently incarcerated and are deliberately silenced. In 2019, the Vera Institute provided data that more than 10 million arrests are made each year in the United States, with an arrest made every 3 seconds. Within this statistic, fewer than 5% of these are for serious violent crimes. Busboys and Poets strives to inform the public of why criminal justice reform is necessary, as well as provide a platform for those with a criminal record and allies in this fight to end mass incarceration. We also hope to provide victims the proper welcoming back home that they deserve. We decided to highlight mass incarceration and prisoner justice awareness during this week because we discovered that Prisoners Justice Day is a solidarity movement that takes place annually on August 10th. The movement began in Canada in 1974 in support of prisoners' rights and to remember all the people who have died of unnatural deaths while incarcerated. And it's also customary for this annual movement for those who are incarcerated who are participating within Canada to take a moment of silence. So if you all remember on August 10th to take that moment of silence, please feel free to participate, for this is a true concern that happens too often. This evening, we have speaker Kristin Henning and John Bunn here to discuss how America criminalizes Black youth and what we can do about it. Kristin Henning is a nationally recognized author, trainer, and consultant on the intersection of race, adolescence, and the policing of Black youth. She is the Bloom Professor of Law and Director of the Juvenile Justice Clinic, and we have some other people from the Juvenile Justice Clinic as well, an initiative at Georgetown Law, and was previously the lead attorney of the Juvenile Unit at the Public Defender Service for the District of Columbia. Chris has been representing children accused of crime for more than 26 years and is the co-founder of a number of initiatives to combat racial injustice in the juvenile and criminal legal systems, including the Ambassadors for Racial Justice Program and a Racial Justice Toolkit for Youth Defenders. Chris also trains state actors across the country on the impact of racial bias on youth in the courts and the traumatic effects of over-policing and hyper-surveillance. She has received several awards, including the 2021 Leadership Prize for the Juvenile Law Center and the 2022 of Distinction Award from the American Association of Women. We can give her a nice round of applause. Those are big accomplishments. Chris has written many articles in other publications advocating for reform in the juvenile legal system. One of these publications include Rage of Innocence, which we are selling this evening. So if you brought your copy, bring it over, get it signed. If you need a copy, please come over and also look at the other selection that we have on mass incarceration and etc. John Bunn was wrongfully convicted of a murder committed in 1991 when he was 14 years old. He spent over 16 years in prison and nearly 12 years on parole before he was exonerated in 2018. Let's give him a round of applause. That is amazing. After his release, Bunn founded a nonprofit, A Voice for the Unheard, that aims to educate incarcerated youth and provide access to books to promote literacy. Bunn has been featured on many major media channels, including CNN, The Breakfast Club, Power 105.1, New York Times, and many others. And without further ado, please give a round of applause for your amazing speakers this evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, John.
Good evening, Chris. So I have some questions for you, and I would like to kick off with that.
Yeah, please.
Are you ready? So today is part of a week-long conversation about mass incarceration, including the historical link between American institution of slavery and modern-day slavery through incarceration. I have heard you say that our country's obsession with incarcerating Black America begins with Black children. Your book, The Rage of Innocence, How America Criminalizes Black Youth, really lays this out. Can you talk about that history?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And, you know, even before I talk about the history, I just want to say it's an honor to be here with you, having this conversation. And thank you for the folks who've come out. It's good to see old friends and meet some new ones. Mehdi and Ellen and Martha and Tessa and all the folks from Georgia. I really appreciate many of you and folks I don't know. So let me just say this. Absolutely, John, spot on. This notion that mass incarceration begins with Black children and brown children is critically important. And I think so often when we have these conversations, the conversation starts with adults, right? Which is critically important. And that's what we think about as the face of mass incarceration. People who look like you as you sit here now, but remembering, as Tamara told us, you went in at the age of 14, very much a victim, if you will, and we'll talk about your story eventually today before we leave. You went in very much as a victim of the system. And so when I say that, this idea that mass incarceration begins with Black children, I am saying, I'm asking us to think about how incredibly expedient it is, right, to begin incarcerating Black and brown children before they get old enough to exercise their independence, to assert their rights to resource access, to opportunity, for them to think about, for all of us to think about historically. You asked about the historical connections, to think historically back all the way to the direct through line from the era of the enslavement of Black folks all the way to today, right? And how Black children, in particular in America, if we start there, were treated as the property of their purported masters, right? And that from there, everything else flows, right? So then once we reach this stage of emancipation, the folks in power, right, landowners, former enslavers, have to figure out a way, how do I maintain that power? How do I preserve resources for self? So this is what I mean by how expedient is it to begin to criminalize, right, incarcerate, isolate, remove Black children from society. When slavery was no longer permitted by law, then are there alternative ways? And so I began to think about criminalization of Black and brown children as very much a continuation of the preservation of power and of resources. And I think we see that throughout the rest of history as well. So if we fast forward to the civil rights era and think about the ways in which Black children were criminalized for protesting, for example, right, in schools. The ways in which Black children were criminalized for trying to integrate schools. Fast forward to the 1990s, and this is really important when we come back and we talk about John Bunn, talk about you, John, about the ways in which the politicians and the media demonized Black and brown children for political gain, right? So in order to ensure power in the mid-1990s, during the crack epidemic, this temporary uptick in crime, Black children became named explicitly and targeted explicitly as in that war on crime and the war on poverty and the like. And that's very much at the heart of John's story, which we'll come to. And then, bring it forward to contemporary times. And I say very, very contemporarily as we sit in Washington, D.C., and what feels like an uptick in crime right now. Right? Yes, we feel there is crime. It feels different. It looks different. But remembering several things, that crime isn't as extreme as it was in the 1990s, and that notwithstanding the media narrative, children in our city are not the driving source of that crime. But you still see now again that media narrative, hot and heavy, that Black children have run amok, or just children. We don't use the race word anymore, but that children are run amok and are out to assault and kill and carjack all the kids, instead of focusing on that narrow, small portion of the population that is indeed responsible for crime. So that's the through line, the historical through line.
Thank you for your answer. So I have a second part of that question I want to ask. Yeah. So you agree that we still live in a modern day slavery time?
Very much so.
Okay.
Just under a new name, it's like slavery by a new name. Now, it just continues to evolve, and all of it is about, a preservation of power, limits, controlling, and isolation. So yeah, very much so.
So your book clearly grows out of your own experience representing children accused of crime in Washington, D.C. over the last 26 years. What led you to write this book?
Yeah. So, as Martha knows, at least, I, have been practicing in the District of Columbia for 26 years, representing kids charged with crime and delinquency. And in that entire 26 years, I have only represented 4 white children. That is it. And I tell people all the time, everybody in the room should gasp when you hear that number. This is, yes, there are a lot of African Americans in the city. Yes, there was a time when Washington, D.C. was known as the Chocolate City, but that era has passed. And there are plenty of white folks in the District of Columbia. And you also cannot be fooled into believing that white children do not commit crime. Children are children. There is the teenage crime bump, right? Teenagers act like teenagers, right? And so, we know that children of all races and all classes all over the world engage in criminal behavior during those teenage years. But in the District of Columbia, we only see Black kids. Literally, we only see Black. We don't even see Latino kids anymore. There was a time when we did. We do not anymore. And then across the country, beyond Washington, D.C., the racial disparities may look different in terms of raw numbers, but the racial disparities are as extreme even in the most rural, isolated place. If you've got 2% Black folks, somehow they will manage to incarcerate 5%, of the whole population of folks, so the ratio is really quite extreme. And so I should say, I'm sorry, John, to finish your question, that's why I wrote the book. It's like, you can't do this work as long as I have for 26 years and not want to know why these extreme disparities exist, how these extreme disparities and criminalization of Black and brown kids, how that's impacting, right, those children developmentally, physically, mentally, psychologically, all the ways that matter. So that's what this book was about. It was about an opportunity to answer those hard questions, and also it was about an opportunity to tell stories that I could talk about that. I could go out in the field and I could give you stats. I can tell you, I could be angry, but until people really can see themselves in the stories, till people can see themselves in the children that we talk about, that's what really changed hearts and minds. And I know I've heard you talk about changing hearts, right? I feel the same way. We have to change hearts and minds. And one of the ways to do that is by telling stories, which is to share the stories of the kids.
That's amazing. It's peculiar. It's funny you say that you only represented 4 white children through your whole time. When I think back and reflect back, when I was incarcerated as a juvenile, I'm thinking now, I don't remember any white children with us.
Right. And you were in New York.
In New York City.
That's right. People tell that all over the place. Yeah, a lot of urban centers. Obviously, in many places in the country, there are white kids in courts, right? But there are pockets of our country where you just don't see, white kids, even though they're experimenting with drugs, experimenting with alcohol, engaging in, fights, things that our kids end up for.
Use the words criminalization and dehumanization. Use the words criminalization and dehumanization in your book. What do you mean by that? What does criminalization and dehumanization of Black youth look like in our country?
Yeah, and thank you for that. It shows me that I'm using words that I should not be using, dehumanization. But here's the deal. Criminalization is all about the ways in which we treat normal adolescent behaviors as criminal offenses when committed by people of color. That's largely what I'm getting at, right? The ways in which we police children, criminalize children in ways that are unnecessary and unwarranted. So you might criminalize a child for mental health concerns, criminalize a child for drug addiction, criminalize a child for poverty, right? And criminalizing a child for normal adolescent behaviors. So what do I mean by that? Normal adolescent behaviors. I literally ask you to think about, what did you care most about when you were a teenager? Right? We cared about the clothes that we wore, the way we styled our hair. We cared about the friends that we sat with, the parties that we got invited to, the music that we listened to, all the ways we broke the rules. That's what it means to be a teenager. That's what it means to be a kid. And so when I talk about criminalization, I'm saying that we allow white children, we allow children in wealthy neighborhoods by and large to do all of those things. Right? But when it comes to Black and brown children, we criminalize those behaviors. So I could take any one of those, like take music, for example, country music, heavy metal, pop music. I'm sure I'm missing some genres. All of those genres, right, have the same sort of misogynistic lyrics, right? They glorify drugs, sex, and alcohol, but pretty much without consequence. But you start talking about rap music and hip hop music, the children who listen to that music are treated as the most dangerous music alive, right? Thinking about kids who hang out together in the cafeteria and dress alike. Dare I ask, how many of you dressed alike, had some friend, 1 or 2 friends that you dressed alike? I did, right? Nobody called me a gang member back then, but that's what we see, right? Like, kids who hang out together in a cafeteria, dress alike, might see each other, give each other a sign. They are automatically treated like a gang, as opposed to white kids in a fraternity, a sorority, all of those things. So that's what I mean by criminalization. By dehumanization, I mean that is all about the psychological ways in which we look at a Black child and don't see them as a child. We don't see them as a human being. It allows us to treat them or not treat them at all, not to be empathetic, not to be compassionate, not to have grace. So I think about you, John, convicted at the age of 14 years old, and convicted as an adult, right? I think about all the ways in which people had to look at you and see you as an adult, right? That's it. The notion of dehumanization ties with adultification. Like, I no longer see you as my own child. Instead, I see you as an inanimate object, right? As something less than human and of adult-like qualities, even at the innocent age of 14. So that's what I mean.
Doesn't the Constitution say that the Black person is considered a 3/4 of a human being?
That was right historically, right? You know, when they were trying to justify, barbaric behaviors like the enslavement of Black and brown people, indeed, you've got to, when you grant them the right to vote, you only slowly grant them, 3/4 of a vote, meaning the state can only count, Black folks as 3/4 of a person for purposes of the tally. So yes, that's one of the many ways. It's such a beautiful example, a painful but perfect example of the ways in which people of color have been dehumanized. Question.
Your book is not an legal academic text, but instead weaves together stories and research to make your point. Why did you choose this approach?
Yeah, so this goes a little bit back to the question that you asked earlier about why did I write the book in the first place? So, I made an intention, a purposeful decision not to write this as a legal textbook or as a legal academic text, but to do storytelling, to make it narrative. And so I cover psychological research, social science research, I include data, but I go out of my way to try to talk about all of that in plain language. And so again, the idea is let the stories lead, let the stories drive, but yet let me educate along the way. And so the reason for doing that is, look, all the naysayers, right, are going to pick fights with one or the other, right? So if I wrote a book that was only stories, only narrative, then they would say these are my one-off isolated stories. But if I marry that with the data and with the research, I can demonstrate that this is more than just the kids that I represent. It's more than just John Bunn, right? And then the other flip side of it is I could have written a book just on data, and just on the research, but that would be boring, A. But also too, people aren't moved. Some people are moved, but people are generally not moved just by numbers and science. They need to hear and to feel the pain of real people. And so that's why the combination.
Just for the record, your book is like the Bible for an individual like myself.
I appreciate that. Wow. Appreciate that.
We have to talk about criminalization of Blacks and brown children in schools. The school to prison pipeline is an important aspect of mass incarceration in America. First, what is the school to prison pipeline?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I would say like a very short, basic answer. It is all of the policies, procedures, what I call norms, cultural statements, I think. It includes all of the laws that push children from the school system into the legal system, right? So instead of educating children, instead of caring for children, instead of feeding children in schools, all the things that we've come to see schools do, that instead of doing that work, they funnel children out and into the legal system, right? And so we could talk about, some of the ways in which the laws operate. It's also the way, when I talk about procedures, it's also the presence of police in schools, right? It's all of those mechanisms that make it so incredibly easy to move a child from the school system into the legal system. And it is, I think the other really important thing about it is, apropos to our conversation today, it disproportionately impacts Black and brown kids.
Wow. You also you talk about the presence of police in schools all across the country. And again, it is very interesting to read about the historical evolution of police in schools, or SROs. In your book, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I have a whole chapter 6 on cops in schools that you've read and you're referring to. And I talk about the history of police in schools. I have to tell everybody, before writing this book, I bought into the often repeated narrative that we have police in schools today because parents and teachers were afraid to send their children back to school after the mass shooting in Columbine, Colorado. And it wasn't until I dug in and I realized something that I should have known all along, which is that police were first introduced in schools in 1939 in response to the earliest even inkling of a conversation about integrating schools. Fast forward to the Civil Rights era again, talking about some of that same history, and you see that police in schools increase exponentially. And we know that they were sent to the schools under the guise of providing a safe passage for children who were going to integrate. But we know from the historical record, we know from the iconic photographs that far too often police in schools became an impediment to meaningful integration of schools. And so fast forward again to those 1990s, and after the super predator era, right? This era that where John Brown, that's right, you know this well, in which John Bunn and others were convicted in, and where Black kids were targeted. The federal government increased the funding for police in schools again exponentially. And it was in that 90s that you see the federal cops in schools framework was created, right? Where they were incentivizing schools all across the United States to put police in schools. Mind you, though, that was in 1994 and 1995. You all, that was still 3 years before Columbine ever happened. So that the evolution of police in schools has always been a racialized history, right? And then sure enough, Columbine does happen, and the federal government does increase funding for police in schools one more time, or yet again, I should say. But where do those police officers get sent? They don't get sent to the Columbines and the Sandy Hooks. They get sent to inner city urban schools with a predominantly Black and brown presence. That's the legacy and the evolution of police in schools. More police in schools means more arrested schools. More arrested schools means more arrest of Black and brown children. So powerful story.
You also talk about the criminal laws that are used to criminalize Black youth at schools. What are these disturbing school laws?
So this is powerful. This is something I really didn't grasp and understand well until I wrote this book. And there are a slate of laws, as I talked about with the school to prison pipeline. It includes all the laws that make it easier to send kids into the prison system. And the one of the laws that you just talked about is the disturbing schools. There are literally states and cities. So states have state statutes, cities with city ordinances that allow a child to be arrested and criminally prosecuted for disturbing schools. Again, dare I ask you, how many of you have ever disturbed school? As a teenager, we all did that, right? We all have done that. And so, but literally, it can be anything from disorderly conduct in school, talking back to teachers, roaming the hallways when you're supposed to be in class. Kids were getting, and still are in some places, are getting arrested for that. And so part of the national push around decriminalization has been to decriminalize some of those laws. Many states, many states still have them on the books. South Carolina is an example of a state that relatively recently rescinded those laws. Because there was so much controversy and complaint about them. And when you pull data for disturbing schools, criminal offenses, they are almost uniformly Black and brown kids, almost uniformly.
What have you observed about students with disabilities, learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities, etc., and how police and the juvenile court system deal with our youth?
Yeah, another great question. So what we see is that children with disabilities are even more likely to be criminalized than children without a disability. And when I talk about disability, I'm talking about learning disabilities, cognitive disabilities. You mentioned some of these, speech and language impediments, autism, and the ways in which those, I don't even want to call it behaviors, but ways in which those children manifest those disabilities begins to look like aggressive and threatening behavior. Now, what have we been talking about? We talk about children of colors. So the intersection between race and a child with disability. So that means we're looking at those children who engage in behaviors that are manifestations of their disability through a racially biased lens. And so those children with disabilities are even more likely to be perceived as violent and dangerous as a result. So it's really, really disturbing to think about exponentially, like a Black child is significantly more likely to be arrested at school than a white child. A Black child with a disability is even 3 times more than that likely to be arrested and referred to the system.
Wow. You have some interesting insights about the important benefits of play, recreation, and leisure, and how we deprive Black youth the need to play. One of the prime examples of this is the killing of Tamir Rice, who was playing with a toy gun in the park when he was shot. Can you talk about the recreational play and the play in play? Can you talk about why recreational play and why it's important for the Black children and how it's denied in our all wrong?
That's all right. But so I definitely know where you're going with this.
Let me say that all over.
Okay.
I apologize, right?
That's all right.
I said, can you talk about the recreation? Can you talk about why recreation and play are important and how Black children are denied that opportunity?
Yeah. So this is another thing that I stumbled upon. Actually, you're asking all the questions or the things that I learned as writing. I didn't come into this space knowing about this, but one of the things that I learned about the absolute necessity, developmental necessity of recreation, play, and leisure. Something I really hadn't contemplated. I think a lot of us, we take it for granted, that kids go outside and play. I think, until we were in the pandemic, we as adults took it for granted that leisure is incredibly important to relieve stress, to relieve anxiety, for physical exercise. We just take that for granted, right? But what I realized in the criminalization, the shooting of a child like Tamir Rice while he's playing, is significantly undercutting a developmental necessity, right? And it's very much a part of structural racism. So I think about structural racism, the formal ways and informal ways in which we discriminate against Black kids. One of them is to deny them recreation, play, and leisure. So the most extreme example is the killing of Tamir Rice while he is outside at a recreation facility in Cleveland, Ohio, doing what he's supposed to be doing, playing with his mother's permission. She knew exactly where he was, all the things, right? And he gets shot for playing with a toy gun. Again, how many of you played with a toy gun as a kid? I did. I definitely did. I just say that's an extreme example. But now it's also deprived through the criminalization. How is it deprived? It's deprived because police officers station themselves at playgrounds, local recreation facilities where kids play, right? Civilians, not just police in a police uniform by any means. Civilians call the police when they see the kids playing in the corner, street corners in their neighborhood, sitting out on the front porch. Those kinds of things are ways in which we deprive kids of play. We also deprive kids of play when we criminalize them for normal adolescent behaviors, like doing what kids do. They get sent to detention facilities. They have a concrete slab, right? And 1 hour of play at best in most detention facilities for play and recreation time. And I just learned how incredibly important play and recreation is. And so I'll just say this one last thing about this, which is that I had no idea that there is a whole school, an academic school of study around play, recreation, and leisure. Just didn't know that, right? It's very often in the School of Parks and Recreations within area colleges. And there are these wonderful doctors, and in particular, a group of African-American doctors who have started an analysis of critical race theories of play. So they call it crit play, which is a whole doctrine of studying the ways in which race and racism have undermined play. So really fascinating. Dr. Harrison Pinckney and Dr. Razul Moat, for those folks who are looking it up. I see a couple of people Googling. Definitely check them out, among others.
Okay. What impact does criminalization, hypersurveillance, and policing have on adolescent development? Specifically, can you talk about the trauma associated with policing and criminalizing adolescents?
Yeah, and I really want us to get to your story, because I think your story talks about it, right? Or really manifests, what does it mean? What is the criminalization? What impact does it have on adolescent development? It impacts virtually every aspect of healthy adolescent development, from, truly can alter the brain, if you will, can really undermine cognitive thinking and cognitive reasoning. When you think about it this way, I should probably start this way, which is think about arresting a child, putting them in a detention facility, sentencing them to long periods of incarceration. What does incarceration look like? It looks like rigid day-to-day procedure. Get up at 8, you probably get up at 6, really, have your meals, very structured and regimented. That's the last thing we want for children, right? Teenage brain is fluid and flexible and creative, right? Learns through trial and error and problem solving, right? That's what being a teenager who evolves into a healthy cognitive, a processing adult. And when we put kids in prison and in jails, we stifle that. We stifle the creativity through the rigidity, right? And the routinization of daily activities. We don't allow them to push back. We don't allow mistakes. We don't allow any of that. So that's one, right? Also, two, we are pulling them out of their communities and out of their families at one of the single most important times in their lives, right? Who do you need most? Even if you don't think you need it, who do you need most? You need your family. Whatever that family is, a traditional family with a mom or a dad, or 2 moms, 2 dads, whatever that looks like, right? That's what they need. They need the people who are most significant, right, in their lives. And that's not what, we give them when they're criminalized, right? Also stigma and embarrassment, right? So this is a child who is in school, supposed to be in school, and now has a record. So even if they don't get held in detention, the neighborhood knows. And I talk about some of the stories that I opened the book with, is a child who was completely stigmatized by teachers and classmates because he got arrested, right? For something completely adolescent foolishness, that kind of thing. So thinking about stigma, thinking about the school to prison pipeline. So the criminalization of kids means kids are getting expelled, suspended from school, in addition to getting arrested. That is an extraordinary deficit during the developmental stage. I've already talked about play and recreation. So we could go on and on. It's really, it's the last thing that we should be doing to kids, is treating them like criminals.
There were a couple chapters in your book that were hard to read. One was when you was talking about the trauma of Black youth suffer when they are prosecuted and incarcerated as an adult. You write about Khalif Browner and Nisi Fennell and how those cases shattered youth and families and caused grief, pain, and mental, physical, and emotional tolls. Can you tell us a bit about the harms of treating and prosecuting youth as adults?
Yeah, and so this is where we're definitely gonna switch. I'm gonna say my piece, and I've asked. One of the things is that I really, Tamara said that I could invite whomever I wanted to be in conversation with, and I was very, very clear that John Bunn was one of the folks I really wanted to be in conversation with, because of this very question, right? Which is towards the end of the book, I begin to talk about the incarceration of children with adults, right? So all of the harms that I've already talked about, the developmental harms, are 100 times worse when we're talking about putting kids in adult facilities. So thinking about a 14-year-old in prison with adults. And so we're talking about the risk of physical violence from other inmates, the risk of physical violence from guards and staff, which we cannot contemplate. It's huge and significant. Sexual violence is rampant in adult facilities involving in which that include younger folks who are prey and who are vulnerable. We're talking about the stigma is much worse in adult facilities, because at least when you get a juvenile court record, your record is technically supposed to be confidential. We know that it's not. But in adult court, right, it's all over national news, right? It's all over. And yours was a high profile case. John's was a high profile case. So everybody knew that John had gotten arrested for a murder that he didn't even commit, but nobody knew that at the time, right? Obviously he did, and a lot of people from the community did. So think about how devastating that can be on one's life and one's future prospects. So devastating. You listed like Khalif Browder, Nisi Fennell. Folks know Khalif Browder. His experience as a 16-year-old in Rikers Island, right, was so extreme, he took his own life, even after he got out. Also someone he wasn't even convicted, right? Wasn't even convicted, spent 3 years in jail in Rikers Island because he was falsely accused of robbing someone, right? Much of his 3 years he spent in solitary confinement. Tragic beyond tragic. And I say this all the time, okay? I'm gonna get off my soapbox, like start asking John questions, but this really makes me so angry. Every single player in the system who touched Khalif Browder's case is responsible for what happened to him. And I include, I'm a member of the defense bar. I represent kids. I hate to say this out loud, but I just feel like in some ways, right? Every prosecutor, every judge, every defense attorney, every person, every police officer, every guard who touched this case had some responsibility for that outcome. And he gets out, and he's still so psychologically traumatized from the experience of being in, he takes his own life, right? That is terrible. So one of the things is I've become, good friends with John, and one of the things that John is clear on is, I'm not going to speak for you. I'm going to stop speaking for you in a minute. But that he wants his story known, and I want to be a part of helping him get that story known. And so we're working on a joint project around that. But my book segues directly into his book, right? And so what I wanted to do is to turn the table a little bit and to say to you, John, Tamara gave a little bit about your story, but can you start us off by telling folks, where did you grow up? What city, what borough, where did you grow up? And, what was a little inkling into your early life? And then we'll talk about what happened.
I grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, in the Crown Heights area. It was like in an area between Brownsville and Crown Heights. I grew up in a time where my first 5-6 years of me growing up was like really, really good. I had good Christmases. It was a different experience for me. But like by the time I was like 6 or 7 years old, the crack that infested my household. By the time I was like 9, it's like my household was so infected with the crack and all the drugs and the alcoholism. It's like my home done became like a crack house at that point. It's just like a smokehouse. They wasn't selling drugs out of it, but that's where the individuals had came to get high. And I was in my household. I was experiencing this type of environment every day. I grew up without having a father. My father was killed due to gun violence, so I never met him. And me growing up without any male structure, it was just, me trying to figure myself out where I fit in and what was going on around me.
Yeah, and John and I have had this conversation many, many times. It's a very difficult conversation, and it's a conversation that he wants to have. And so we press through this as difficult as it is, and you have tissues, and we will take our breaks as we need to take breaks to have this conversation. So that's the environment that you grew up in. And you said, we've been talking about the 90s, right? This is like, you were how old in, let's say 95? How old were you in 95?
In 1995, I was 15 years old.
You're 15, okay. And so at 14, when you get falsely convicted, you are, that's what, 94?
In 1995, I was actually 17 years old.
You were 17, so you had already been in for 3 years.
Yes.
So okay. So we're going to turn to when you were 14. At 14, you're growing up, in New York during this crack epidemic, during the super predator era. And everybody clear on what the super predator era is, where Black kids are really being targeted for all that is going on that is wrong in the world, right? And what happens at the age when you're 14? What happens? What big event happens in the city that led to you being targeted?
2 corrections officers got killed in my neighborhood, and I was blamed for it. I was accused and I was blamed for it. I was only 14 years old. I was illiterate and read. I was living in poverty. Had no financial backing, and I would say I was kidnapped by the system at this point, and was put in a position where I was left to fend for my life as a kid in a situation that I really didn't understand the magnitude of at the time. My life has been based around that trauma and that event ever since. It was like one morning I was having breakfast with my mother, and we received like a bang on our door. So my mother went to the door, and when she went to the door, she opened the door, but when she looked out the peephole, she seen my basketball coach. So she opens the door. When she opens the door, like they bombarded my house with like maybe 20, 30 police officers, all plain clothes, helicopters. They came for me like they was coming for, like public enemy number one. My little sister was only 4 at the time. And one of the things I remember about that whole incident was she didn't want to let me go. Like she was grabbing on the side of like my leg. And they was trying to escort me back to my room so I could get dressed, because I was in my underclothes, but they wanted to get me dressed to take me down to the precinct. And my little sister was so scared. She was only 4 at the time. She was holding on to like my side of me, and she didn't want to let me go. And they started to push her away. And that experience right there was like breaking for me. Like that broke me to like started making me very emotional. Just seeing that they had the power to do that, and I was powerless at this time. I couldn't do anything. They wound up taking me out of my household, and once they got me out of my mother's jurisdiction, they started questioning me about a murder and a homicide that I had no knowledge of. It led to them questioning me to the middle of the night, and a road detective by the name of Louis Barcella, he became the lead detective in the situation. And I remember at some point when they decided to put me in the lineup, because they wanted me to testify. Well, not even testify. They wanted me to write a statement and say that the other individual who was accused in this case with me, my co-defendant, that I seen him with a gun before, and what kind of gun, and things of that nature. And they wanted me to make a video statement. So they told me if I didn't make the video statement, that they was gonna go forward and make me the shooter. So it went from me having information that they thought I had to give them, to them actually making me the person that was the killer. They wanted to put me in a lineup with adults. Like everyone was adults in the lineup that was inside me. And I remember them moving me around because they had to sit me on a crate. I was so small in body frame. And about 5 minutes into the lineup, Louis Marcella came into the room and said it was my lucky day I got picked. Ever since that day, my life has been, an uphill battle for me. I've been fighting, fighting this battle, trying to stay alive, trying to survive, and now they're trying to, be of purpose and live a purpose. But this whole system has drowned in my whole life and took, so much away from me that it's hard to rebuild at this point. So and now I just try to get the best of myself to other individuals to get something out of it, because it took so much away from me that I could never get back. That the only way I found meeting and going forward is like helping others at this point.
And that's how I met John, doing great work on behalf of others. As Tamara said in her introduction, you doing literacy work for folks. And so you are an extraordinary light to so many people. And we appreciate your putting yourself in spaces like this to have this conversation, to educate folks. I will pause here and just say, even in that part of the story alone, we see so many errors in the system, right? Everything from, again, we've already talked about the incarceration of a 14-year-old with adults, right? We're talking about the interrogation, right, of a child, right, without a lawyer, without a parent, right? The way you described it, being, dragged from your home, from your family at 14, right, without any understanding about why. This should help you understand why it is 14-year-olds don't belong in the adult system, and they shouldn't be treated the way you talked about. You talk about lineups, right, and the ways in which lineups can be faulty. Right? We haven't really gotten into Scarcella. I'm not sure how much time we'll have, but the ways in which the detective was dead set on finding a culprit in this case, whether it was right or whether it was wrong. All of that just comes out in the first part of your story. And then you talk about, John, how you felt like so much was taken from you. As was said in the introduction, you spent 16 years, 16 years after that day in prison. So what I know is that after you got taken from your home, you never went back. So trial, like court hearing, I shouldn't even say trial, court. Can you just say just a little bit about how you went from being dragged out of your home, you get interrogated, you get put in a lineup, and then you're in court and you end up convicted. Say a little piece about that, and then we'll say a piece about what it was like to be inside.
I said 16 months going back and forth to court. Getting assigned different attorneys because most attorneys didn't want to represent me for different reasons. I wound up getting assigned an 18B lawyer.
Which is, can I just interrupt? Just say it's a court-appointed lawyer in New York, yeah. Right? That's just the statute upon which he got a court-appointed lawyer.
18B lawyer is a court-appointed lawyer that practices, but takes a certain amount of cases for only the paid tax at the end of the year, so they don't got to pay tax. It's a tax write-off. The court attorney that I was appointed and was assigned to was suffering from the beginning stages of dementia. I didn't know that at the time. Due to the fact that my case was against correctional officers, me and my co-defendant would get like, we stopped really didn't want to go to our court dates because we would get into it with the police, right? One time they broke my nose. A couple other times they did some other stuff. But we got to the point where we wasn't really excited about going to court anymore, because that's when it was really intense for us, for dealing with correctional officers directly, right? So we was good with like just waiting for our day to go to trial. We was figuring that when we go to trial, both of us being naive to law, and both of us being illiterate. He's still illiterate to this day. I just got a little bit better. But we felt that if we could make it to trial, that we was gonna get a fair shake. That not even a fair shake. We just felt like if we was gonna make it to trial, we was gonna have our day in court because we thought that's how law worked. As long as we didn't really do this crime, once we made it to the point of trial, all the truth has got to come out, and we thought that it was going to come out that way. We thought that all we had to do was be innocent, and the system was going to protect us. We made it almost 17 months, 16 and a half months to go to trial, and we picked out a jury and got convicted all within like 24 hours. It's like you can search high and wide in the law books and you will not find another case like John Bunn or Sean Hargrove. It's like it's really, really hard to find cases of that magnitude that will regard and did where they come back with a conviction. What I remember really about that day was like, I don't really remember crying. I do remember like everything becoming really, really dark around me. How we would get escorted back to our cells the day that we got it came back with our verdict. And everybody in the courtroom was gone. I mean, everybody that was housing in the back of the cells, they already got sent them back, like all the inmates, because it was bad. Like 6 o'clock, they were liberated. The judge had told the jury if they didn't come back with a verdict that night, that they were going to sit in chambers and Thanksgiving holiday. After they came back with the guilty verdict, we was escorted back to our cells. And this was the first time they put us in parallel pins facing each other. And I remember him asking me, he said, are we gonna kill ourselves or we gonna fight this shit? He took off his belt. And I was like, son, I don't wanna die. And ever since we have been fighting, he flushed his butt, he flushed his belt down the toilet. And it's just been on since then. I was speaking earlier and I was saying how prison at some point made me into a monster. I didn't want to die, but I wasn't going to live in this place and not have my respect. So me being in there, or us being in there, but keeping on the eye, it turned me into a monster at some point. I was willing to do anything to anybody that's willing to do anything to me at any cost, right? And when you talk about dehumanization, I look at it like at some point it's like inhumane to live in that environment because you lose value of another person's life. You don't care about another person's life. You just care about survival. And the person will exploit you in it for any reason, any reason. Your kids, your money, your manhood, your family, your mother, anything. So at some point, I felt like I had lost my spirit in there. Like I didn't believe I was gonna make it out, but I lost like my soul. Like I stopped like believing like it was God and stuff. It's hard to believe in things like that when you're going through things like I'm going through. You try to find things to keep you sane, you know, and one of the reasons why I base my my organization around literacy, because that's what helped me keep my sanity. That's what brought me back to being a human being. Like that's what I felt like restored me back to, like giving me imagination, making me think like I could close my eyes and see outside these four walls. It wasn't about them caging me in and me dying in here. Like I felt like I could take my mind outside of this place that they had me in. And that's what reading did for me. I'm still not
a college graduate. I'm not the best reader there is, but I could read enough to get by and get my way through things. And that's been my strength, you know. So I thank you guys for being me facing one of my fears today is me up here sitting here reading questions that I wrote, or just reading questions to me. And, out aloud. It's one thing for me to sit and do it to myself and quietly, but to be in a room and it still being a fear that I still carry with me, So I'm facing it, one of my fears today. And but there's certain traumas that get attached onto you that never could be erased. And I'm just trying to make it all make sense at this point.
So you ended beautifully, John, because that was going to be my next and last question, because I want to open it so that other folks can ask questions. Was going to be what got you through and how are you so resilient today? And you answered that. I've seen that resilience in you since I met you, and it's beyond phenomenal. I can't listen to your story without shedding tears. And this is what's so remarkable. I really just cannot say this enough. You're telling a story that happened to you, a trauma that started when you were 14 years old, lasted 16 years in prison, and then 11 years trying to clear your name afterwards, right? And it still has this much impact on you as you sit here today. It's unfathomable for an average citizen, right? But the fact that you are here, you started your nonprofit, that you are intentional about writing your story, getting your story out there so that it can make a difference, advocating for reform, all of it. All power to you. So I just want to really. So just amazing. It's hard for me to listen to your story and not shed tears a number of times that we've talked it through. But you said something today, even earlier before this all started, that you want to make sure your story is not just a sad story, right? But it's a story that makes a difference, a story that has hope, a story that has resilience. And I think you've helped us do that today. So thank you.
And I said I wasn't going to cry.
That's right. You go right ahead. So what we wanted to do was to open it out for folks to ask questions, and we'll try our best to answer them. Ask either one of us. So, yeah. Mm.
And I don't have a question, but I just want to let you know that you are amazing.
Hmm.
You really are. And you love. I love you.
Love you too.
It's so amazing. Thank you for coming here for him. He told me y'all were coming. It's really beautiful.
So I always say I was in the right place to stop a really bad person from doing a really bad thing, and I was just at the right place at the right time to stop them. On my 16th year, I had started facilitating an anger management program. And I was assigned a supervisor. She was a young Caucasian white woman, about 23 years old. She was green to the system. However, she cared about us. And I say this from my heart. Like, she really, like, the people that she dealt with after she got there, she took a liking to them and she really cared about us. As far as like getting us certain things that we needed. She was labeled a nigga love at some point. One morning, she had made a call-out list. And the call-out list is like individuals she got to interview every 90 days to make sure that they're up to par inside the prison. Along with her assignment as supervising the program that we were working for, she had a small group of inmates that she would interview every 90 days to make sure that they had all their programming, had all whatever whatever it took to make their parole good time and things like that, she would tell them what was necessary of them. Make a long story short, one particular morning, while we was teaching the classes, she had put this individual on a call out, and a police officer that was assigned to her unit had left his post, so she was unmonitored. The individual that she had put on the call out was actually a predicate rapist. A predicate rapist is an individual who's on a third time serving a life sentence for a particular crime. So he was a 3-time loser for rape, serving 25 years on a rape case. This particular morning when he came up on the call out, he noticed that the police officer wasn't at his post, and he's been asking this particular counselor to put him on a transfer for the last 3 or 4 months, right? He wanted to go on a transfer under protective custody, but he didn't want to sign in anyone. And due to the fact that he was serving a life term, if he would have went in protective custody and put it under somebody's name, it follows you from facility to facility. So she was telling him, if you want to go into protective custody, basically you got to give me somebody's name that you're going to protective custody under. He didn't want to do that. He didn't have anyone that he was trying to get away from. He was just trying to get out of the drug debt. He was buying drugs in prison and didn't want to pay his debt. So he was telling her, put me on a protective custody list, get me out of this jail. She was telling him for the last 3 months she couldn't do it. This particular morning when he came up and he seen the officer wasn't at his post, he decided to take advantage and proceeded to close the door behind him. And he took a paper punch and holder. The thing that punch holes in papers, he hit her over the head and proceeded to try to rape her. He crushed her windpipe and proceeded to assault her. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to intervene and stop this individual from doing such a foul act. It's never, I mean, people judge people that's in prison, but it's never a part of a man's nature to see a woman assaulted in that fashion. Even in prison, we not supposed to, even in prison, a rapist doesn't supposed to have respect in there, right? So it was just second nature for me to do what I did. I wound up getting into a physical altercation with him. I stopped him and he wasn't able to proceed and penetrate this woman. Come to find out, he was suffering. Well, he wasn't suffering. He was affected with HIV. So if he would have penetrated her, he would have killed her. 8 months later, after the assault, she comes back into the facility and says she's not going to leave until she gets me out. 4 months later, I went to my parole hearing and they didn't recognize the incident. She came and told me there's no way that she's not going to get me out of here. And maybe like 3 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail from the commissioner of parole and I got a special condition release. And that's how I was initially let out of prison on life parole, but because of that incident.
I saw a question in the back.
Part of the reason why I do what I do is because there's not a lot of people that got enough heart to be transparent in myself, right? And what I mean by that is, like, I always felt like I was super tough. Like, I'm willing to die for what I believe in. And I'm willing to die standing up for what I believe in. I just didn't really know what I was willing to die for. I was willing to die for no reason. Now I feel like I got reason. So I'm gonna go to the extreme. I've never been someone that, was afraid of certain things. I just didn't have any like real drive. Like, so now I feel like I'm a warrior with a purpose. So there's a lot of me's that's never gonna get to tell their stories. But what I'm doing is, and by me being transparent, it's showing my emotion, it's showing the hurt, and that, it can show individuals that this is not something that you want to experience and go through, and that how real it is. Most of the individuals who go through my experience, they put on a facade or persona that they want to make themselves look like a macho man because they come home from prison, got muscles, looking good, gain some weight. You know, that's slow death. And I'm grateful and thankful that I survived it. I don't want to push that energy out there to act like I'm this hero to that experience. You know, I had a lot of things working for me, and I feel like if all those things wasn't working for me, and if they still not working for me, there's no reason for me to be here. In my environment, you know, I did things to survive that I don't feel like, you know, I'm proud of myself for. You know what I mean? So I sold drugs before. I did stuff that I'm way not proud of myself for. So it's like if I could do all that bad at some point, regardless of why I did it, I gotta be able to make good of this shit. Now I gotta create some type of balance. I gotta get back in a particular way where I can't just take from the universe. I gotta give something back to the universe. You know, I'm 45 right now, right? This done took half of my life already, right? I don't think I got up to 45 in, right? I don't really care to be that old and can't do for myself, right? But whatever time I got left, I want to be of the highest potential I can exist. You know, that's my goal for me. I've never been afraid of death. You know, I just want to live for a purpose now. That's it.
Questions. So yours first and then.
First of all, thank you so much for telling us your story. It's really necessary to actually fix the system and the adjustment.
So either, can we speak up a little bit? I think, yeah.
Oh, probably. Or, you know what, I'll speak.
We should pass the mic around.
We should. That's a great idea.
I'm Jenny, and I'm the digital strategist for Busboys. Unfortunately, I'm very familiar with this system as a person who has had a lot of family members who have been lost to this system, including a sibling who has fortunately, because of the support of my father, has been able to get out of prison. She's a child of 23 years, so it's been a really hard experience to go through, especially when you see other family members go through it and not make it out. And the question I just really wanted to ask was, when you got out, what was the support that you were seeking, and what type of support would have been ideal for you? Like, what is our part for the people who get out of this?
When I was released from prison, I was released on life parole. I was sent back. I wasn't sent back. I went back. I was supposed to go live back with my mother. My mother was still living in the same apartment I got arrested in 16 years prior. Only now, she was sleeping on the same bed springs that done wore away all of the fabric. By now was gone. So when I came home to my mother sleeping on springs. The situation didn't enhance it, didn't better. It was actually worse. I didn't sell drugs until I got released from prison as a way to try to make means of survival. Within 6 months, 7 months, I was on my way back to prison because I couldn't function in society and I wasn't equipped. I was institutionalized. I done fell into depression. I didn't know how to make it. I couldn't get a job. I was on parole as a convicted murderer. And I didn't know how to get through. I wound up getting violated on parole and doing another year in prison, which made 17 years. And during that time, I feel like I got myself more equipped for me to deal with society at that point. And why I say that is because when I was in prison on my initial term, before I got parole, I gave up hope of me getting let go. I looked at it like, I'm gonna do 25 years on this, right? The 25 years would be a life term for a juvenile. So after 25 years, it was said that they would have to let me go because I served the life term. So I already put it in my mind that I was going to do the first 25. So my mind wasn't prepared for me to be back in society that fast. When everything happened and I was let go, it was like I was feeling like it was on top of the world. But when reality kicked in 2 weeks later, I came home to poverty. I came home to the same stuff I left, only this time most of my family members had passed away, aunts, grandmothers, cousins, things of that nature. And I was put in a position to try to figure it all out again. Me staying firm, and I feel like being my own man at some point, and I talked about this with Chris at some point, because I grew up in a neighborhood where it was a stronghold in my neighborhood, right? And what I mean by a stronghold, it was drug dealers and gangsters, or individual we could call gangsters or things of that nature, that would inflict intimidation tactics throughout the whole community, right? So even in my community, when what happened to me, people knew I didn't do the crime that I was convicted of or accused of. They knew it was other individuals involved, but due to the fact of intimidation and things of that nature, the whole community wouldn't even get involved with that, because you would put that umbrella over your name that you a snitch, you told, and something could happen to your family and things of that nature. You know, I grew up like that. I grew up idolizing these individuals and things, and seeing all of this stuff and thinking like these was the individuals of power. I always had a chip on my shoulder because I never met my father, but I knew that he got killed. So I knew that the other men that was coming around didn't mean me no good, because they were just coming around to exploit the women in my family. So it's like nothing. I wasn't equipped for when I got accused when they first locked me up, and I wasn't equipped when they let me go. You know, so it was like I was at this point when I got parole, I was already institutionalized. I learned how to work life from the inside. I was okay with that. I wasn't expecting visits no more. I wasn't worried about none of that stuff. I had my life set up where I could function in prison at this point. And when I came back out here, it was like, you know, I was back to nothing all over. I didn't know how to really function. So, you know, I really didn't have a lot of family support outside of my grandmother and my mother. And, you know, nobody else was really in position to really like do anything for me like that. And I made it work my way. Like I did what I felt like I had to do and try to figure stuff out until I got the resources and people that helped me, you know, try to navigate through the society. Yeah.
So I guess I would just add, if you like, this question about, so how do you help, right, your sister? I think one of the things that I hear in John's story, and I hear in so many of the clients that I talk to, is the trauma of being inside, right? And it seems to be something that people who are on the outside don't really want to talk about. So I think one of the ways in which you can support is letting your sister and your family know that if you want to talk about this, I'm open to hearing what the experience was like. I think that's one thing. I think, if, you know, a lot of people are afraid to share what happened on the inside, and saying, we can help you get counseling, a therapist who you can talk to privately. You don't even have to tell us what it was like to be in the system and the like. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is also from John and other folks that I work with, how difficult it is to get a job and to find an entry, into the world after you have a criminal record. And so doing whatever you can as a family to create new job opportunities, to, milk your network, to find opportunities. Also, even like finding prison reentry. I mean, I know this might be more than what you need, but a lot of prison reentry organizations help people find jobs and connect them to that network. So if your, sister is struggling around employment because she's got a criminal record, thinking about whether or not you can help her break through some of that. I think the third thing that we know from Khalif Browder's story, is patience, right? Like she comes out and you have these moments of just absolute frustration, right? Resentment, maybe. I had this record, or I made a mistake. Nobody's giving me a second chance. Like just being patient through that. What seems like Khalif Browder's mother talks about this, and his siblings talk about this, that he was so quiet and calm and loving. And when he got out, he would have these moments of frustration. Irrational frustration and anger. So if you see that, I think that's one. So those are just a couple of things. Happy to talk or connect you with other reentry services. Yeah.
The reality too is the employment, because people need money. So after about like the couple of weeks, individuals get tired of giving you stuff. When you come home, you have nothing. You have no means of financial gains. You need money. The individuals that I know that's coming home now that I'm helping get jobs, I might have do 25 years and come home and I can help them get into a good work atmosphere. They've been excelling. They've been doing really good. And it's really just like, I feel like the stability of having a stable program where you don't got leisure time, there's a bunch of nothing to do, and you need to have work, you need to get where you can make some money coming back out here. If you can't make no money, your mind start going to the left at some point. It's just the reality, because you feel like you got to lean on people and ask them for everything. And as an adult, when you come home, like me, I come home, I'm 32 years old. I basically got to ask people for money every day or something if I'm trying to do something. And then it goes to asking, I don't want to ask my mother. My mother and them ain't got it. Let me ask my friends, right? What friends do I got? All my friends are individuals I met from prison. I grew up in prison, literally, I grew up. The people I'm meeting, the people I'm knowing, so I don't have a normal network. Most of my individuals I know as friends, you might look at them as criminal because of things they doing to survive in society. These are the individuals I really grew up with. I don't look at them as that because this is what I grew up, people me knowing. This is my network. This is the people I know. So when I get released, these are the people that I know that are familiar with me. The rest of society is still looking at me like a convicted murderer. But I could call this guy down the block. He might be doing something illegal or selling drugs, doing that, but he'll lend me $100. He'll lend me $200. So who am I to judge? It puts you in that particular space, and it makes you compromise because you're trying to find out how to get back in. And then you wind up making bad decisions if you don't have the right resources.
Hi, my name's Maddie. That was my question, like how do we help with reentry programs? My wife is a student of Chris's. That's what she does now, and that's the work she's been doing. But I'll pivot from that to just to say you did a fantastic job reading those questions, and also when Chris said that those are all the things that she learned during her reading and writing this book. So I just wanted to praise you as much as I can for that. That was you did a wonderful job, and thank you for asking those specific hard questions to Chris. The follow-up question from this is an issue of trust. So now that you are out, I'm a psychiatrist, and I've worked with formerly incarcerated people, and working with people to build that trust, that you can tell someone something that you may be scared to tell yourself. Can you speak to that at all as you maybe made those connections now, either with institutions like religious institutions or a therapist or someone that does that kind of thing?
It's hard for me to trust, but I trust by spirit. Like, so I was speaking earlier, right? Like ever since my exoneration, I've been wanting to bring my story to light. I mean, you know, I've been working on different things and being around different people, and due to the fact that I got all the exposure that I got, it's a lot of people that's come around me, and it's really hard for me to trust at this point. But I've been waiting to meet Miss Christian for like years now. So it's like when certain things materialize in my life and become real, it's like I know it's real because I've been not so much praying for it, but like, you know, like talking to God. You know what I'm saying? Like I have conversations with God, you know, and I try to figure out ways for me to go forward. You know, how can I go forward? You know, I feel like once I can't go forward no more, there's no reason for me to be here. So I try to stay in the dynamic of how can I go forward, and I look for blessings in different ways, right? Like how they come about when, you know, people that's willing to embrace me. And when I met her, it was like a blessing answer for me, you know, because I've been approached by many different individuals who want to write my book and, you know, want to help me do this, say they want to help me do this, but it's really about them exploiting me because of they see it's something there for them to exploit, right? And you know, I just been wanting to be in the grace of like good people that I feel like gonna try to take advantage of me, you know. And when I feel like that connection, I don't question it, you know. I go with it because I know that's what we was talking earlier, and she was like, "Why you just don't want to go through all? You don't gotta read." And I was like, you know, I don't want to question my blessing because I feel like I already got the answer already. So it becomes bigger than certain things could ever hurt me with because I feel like I done got there in a particular way, you know. For instance, right? I feel like that because like if I walk out of here and die today or tomorrow, get killed, whatever the case may be, right? I know that my story still won't be told now. So I know that I've been following a particular journey for the right reasons, you know, and I've been sticking to my gut. I ain't going astray. You know, I'm staying militant to what I know is real and staying patient and not forcing nothing, you know. But where I'm at today, you know, I would meet somebody like Miss Christian and I trust them more than I could trust people that I know for long amounts of years. A person in my position, as I explained, you go from being a target from one extreme to being a target on another extreme. You know, now to the fact that I'm exonerated, I've been awarded, I'm looked at like this rich individual, millionaire, whatever, you know, and it's a different reason for individuals to target me at this point. So it's like I went from one dynamic of not trusting nobody because of the way my life has played out, and then I'm in another whole place right now where I can't trust nobody because of the way my life ended up.
Yeah, I was smiling when you asked that question. It's such a powerful question. We've talked about this a couple of times, but today this has come up with some colleagues at Georgetown and trust. I marvel. I literally marvel at you in your ability to walk in faith. And I do think we've all talked about this. The way we met was absolutely a spiritual journey, complete happenstance that we ended up in each other's lives. I'm not looking to write a book. I had no idea was looking to write a book. And then here we found, when you know. The reason why I picked back up on it is thinking about you as a psychiatrist. How do you help someone move past that, right? Who doesn't have the faith? I mean, that's completely, John does operate, the spirit says, I know you're the one. I'm like, I'm the one who do what? But like, when you don't have that, how do you help? And I don't know that I have the answer. I don't know that either one of us have the answer. But it is critical Like, and we've been talking about this trust question separate and apart from a book project, just about all the people that you meet now, all the spaces that you have to walk. Anybody, like, who is it that I'm going to tell my story to in public or not, right? Who am I going to advocate for in terms of city council, state legislative bodies? Do I trust you to sit down and have an honest conversation about that, right? All of that is powerful. And I don't know how you move through that other than by faith, right? Family support and encouragement that this too, shall pass is the wisdom that I got from my family. But so I wanted to add, I just thought one's a fabulous question, one that we've been talking about. And I just so admire you from walking on faith. And I think that's the other piece though, is like, we talk about how to get through hard things in life, faith, family, friends, finding your tribe, mental fitness. All of those are, 5 pillars for how to push through. And I think they apply here, right? Like leaning in on those pillars, and how do we have professionals in that 5th tier who can help move through that back into a space of trust. I don't know how you trust either, but you do.
My name's Jess. I was just wondering, as you had said, you were prison for doing something you didn't want to be, and then when you got out, you were kind of on that 2-week high, and then you were just kind of falling. If you can think of any specific resources that everyone in prison should have to help them when they get out, because there are prisons in Scandinavia, for example, that have immensely lower rates of re-incarceration. They don't even really consider it prison, they consider it rehabilitation. What are some just basic level resources that our prisons could have that you think might help with that re-entry? So even before people are getting out.
To me, right, answering that question honestly is kind of, if you want me to keep it honest with you and I answer that question, I don't know if you're gonna like my answer. But the way I answer that is, right, prison is predator or prey. I don't want to make this look like this is some grade school, or it's really bad people in this place. It's murderers, it's killers, it's rapists, it's everything you can think of in this environment, right? A person will exploit you from everything from your mother to your asshole, literally, right? In that toxic environment, with the guards, the COs that oversee, and most of them is very racially inclined, to a point where you have individuals walking around with black babies hanging on their arms on nooses in prison, right? That's the reality. You understand what I'm saying? The most violent, ignorant individuals in prison are applauded as being respected, right? The individual who stabs, or the most violent, stabs the most people, cuts the most people, gathers the most respect in prison. And that backward mentality, I don't know what you can implement. I don't know what to put into that. What I stand for is preventing, circumventing, not going to prison. I deal with the youth, the children are not going there. I'm not into to be honest with you, the reform of going there, we're going to save this, we're going to change this. To me, a person that grew up in that environment, you can't save that. Like, is that far gone? I don't believe in fixing, you can't fix this system at this point. I do believe that you can take effect on it by individuals who's going to get educations, that's going to go into the system, that's not going to turn a blind eye when they see injustices happening. Like you might have Miss Kristin, other individuals that's going into doing the work, and that's going to not turn a blind eye to John Bunn. But one of my questions that I wanted to ask you was,
with knowing, doing the work that you've been doing for the last, you know the reality like I know the reality. What makes you still want to even go on knowing that the reality?
That's huge, huge, huge. What a great question. I would say, for me, this is going to sound a little naive, but it's almost like it's very similar to what you said, but and I'm going to say it a different way, which is, we've heard it all before. I'm not making it up here. The long arc of justice is long. The arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Clearly not very artfully said. But the point is this: if I can't believe that, I have no purpose, right? Like whatever my calling was, I was saying earlier, when I was interviewed by Tamara, that why did I get into this work? One, part being a Black woman in America. It is impossible to live as a Black woman in America and not to be somehow impacted by the state of racism, discrimination, especially as it relates to mass incarceration. I feel like so many Black families are touched. Mine was touched. My brother, went to prison, died in prison, right? And so it's almost impossible. So there's that. It drove me into wanting to be a defense attorney representing kids in the court system. Once you get in, you can't be in and not be called to the big questions, right? What's the purpose in your life? What's the purpose in your career if you don't have hope and you don't have courage to do something about what you see as systemic injustice? So for me, it's a lot what drives you. Like, we've been through so much, we've seen so much, we've observed real live pain. There's no purpose in continuing this work without courage, without hope, and without wanting to make a difference. So I think that's for me. Ooh, excuse me. I would, and say, I just so applaud your answer. And your question is well received in the sense that we get so many people who ask that. How do we reform the prison system? How do we, do rehabilitation? I know exactly the studies, seen the documentaries on prisons that about rehabilitation, and we've got to come back to that's not the right question. I don't want to say your question's not the right question, but maybe I'll phrase it this way: the preemptive question has to be, how do we prevent people from going in? And that if we're going to spend our resources and we're going to do rehabilitation, we've got to do community-based systemic rehabilitation in all the ways. It's like you talked about, living in poverty, living, in a community of violence that took your father. You talk about, drugs in the community, all the things, right? All of those things are where rehabilitation starts. You're talking about being illiterate at the age of 14. All of that is what prevents folks from going into prison in the first place, like John, talks about, which is where then the violence perpetuates itself. That is not to say that we can't do better by our prisons. I will say that the only thing, because we always have to start the conversation, do the work on the outside first. Inside the prisons, first thing is treating people like human beings. Even nobody, Brian Stevenson says this all the time, nobody's bad as the worst thing they've ever done. It's just not. They're just not. Period. Right? I don't. Talk about rapists and murderers. That rapist was a child, somebody's baby first. Right? Somebody who was broken first. Right? Somebody who killed somebody was broken first. Right? And sometimes just did it, and it was an accident, or it was impulsive. It was all the things. Right? And so first and foremost, to fix is really the wrong word, to address our prison system is to start from a place of humanity, right? Every single person inside is a human being, right? Even if they've taken a life, and you took a life and you're still alive, right? So figuring that piece out, grace and humanity. I think the second piece is safety, right? Like, how do you keep people safe, right? How do you create a culture inside of safety and trust? It's very hard to do, right? But like thinking about that. Literacy. I think is one of John's real strong initiatives is literacy inside, prisons and the like. That's critical. Helping people build and restore self-esteem once they've in that space and feel like they can do something else, right? So vocational opportunities, literacy, all of that. You know, I say all the time, particularly with working with young people, that every single child needs at least one irrationally caring human being in their lives, right? Somebody, no matter what the worst thing you've ever done, I'm still going to stand by you. I'm going to maybe hold you accountable for what you did, but in a way of love and grace, right? And redirection, not shame, not solitary confinement, not putting you in prison for life. It's not that, right? That's what an irrationally caring adult does. And every single child would do better with a team of irrationally caring adults. And so that's what, you know, a good rehabilitative system can do. I should also point out that lengthy periods of incarceration undermine those efforts, right? So we think, this is counterintuitive, right? You think somebody commits a heinous homicide or murder or rape, you put them in for the rest of their lives. You're actually, it's worse. Like, it's figuring out what do they need, what interventions do they need immediately, what kind of reentry do they need, and wraparound support do they need immediately. You keep people in, what happens? You know, it's like what John describes, you become a monster when you're inside. Even people who go in not having done something, people who were exonerated come out worse off. So we've got to figure out how to intervene more quickly, more rapidly in the lives, make it, you know, short, get back out and provide all the resources and support. And then those folks who are are antisocial or so, like, they're a very small percentage, people who are so mentally ill and deranged that they can probably never be safe in the community. We need those folks in the appropriate rehabilitative mental health facilities, not in prisons. You don't take a mentally, you know, deranged person and, you know, lock them up in a box and think they're going to get better. That doesn't happen. So those are my thoughts.
We have time for one more question. I saw this young lady.
My name is Deja. First and foremost, I just want to say thank you for keeping having this whole event. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for telling your story. My heart is racing. My overheard your tears is just. When you see these stories on television, it's not as. That's good. So I thank you very much. I and apostle. The court of my sexuality. So I work with children that are whether that's foster care, incarcerated, just things that they are had a childhood. That can include like poverty, their families blatantly think that they don't love them, so they don't have the support system. Already feeling. What would you say to a child that is going through maybe similar experiences that you went through when you were incarcerated or were in the process of being detained or, you know, outside of the situation, you know, as far as the struggles you were going through before you were incarcerated? What would you say to a child that is experiencing those challenges?
What worked for me was always me feeling inside like I was always bigger than my circumstances. Like I felt I was better than this, you know, and that's what like drew me out of the feeling like letting prison succumb me at some point. Me knowing that I'm bigger than this, like, right. And what I mean by that is that I visualize better things for myself all the time. Like I always wanted the best for myself. I always felt like I deserved the best. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I always felt like in my mind, like I'm deserving of that. No matter what was taken away from me, I felt I was deserving of it. And I don't know if I feel like anything outside of me can like reinstore that feeling, because it's like no matter what's going on around you, you gotta have that self-love, that encouragement in you that make you feel like, you know what I'm saying, I'm a overcome this. You know, there were times where I did give up hope in a lot of situations. Like as far as like when I reflect on it, like as far as like me giving up hope in the power of man. And what I mean by that is like I gave up as far as like them paroling me and things like that. And I already put it in my sight. I'm gonna do this 25. But it wasn't me giving up on myself. I was looking at it like, let me give up on a hope, me putting my hope into these people. I'm big enough, I'm strong enough to do whatever they gonna put on me, and I'm gonna still come up out of this, and I'm gonna still, that's how I was feeling inside, you know what I'm saying? And even when all the doors were shutting on me, I just felt like I'm better than this. Like this ain't supposed to be me, you know? And just not you feeling that way, I also started to assert myself and apply myself in my last few years during my prison terms. You know, I had started facilitating an anger management program where I started doing this program. It was only to achieve me participating in other programs with my family and family reunion programs inside the facility. But when I started actually getting involved in the program and really taking heed to like certain things that they was actually teaching, I started identifying with a lot of issues that I had since a child. And one of those main issues was the anger issue, right? I carry a lot of anger. I was always had this anger issue thing, and I ain't really know how to deal with it. And me not growing up with like any male structure around me, I only grew up around women. And then at some point, women that was addicts, I didn't know how to deal with my emotions, you know, the anger things and things of that nature. And I felt like, you know, not letting your circumstances become you, but you know, self-control is the greatest victory known to man. And as long as you could stay bigger than your circumstances and envision yourself being bigger than your circumstances, if you can visualize it, it can materialize it. I didn't know how I was gonna get where I'm at today when I was in that cell, but I knew that I was gonna reach my level at some way, somehow. And I still don't feel like I reached there yet. That's why I'm still going. But I always seen myself as being in the best in a particular light, even if it was just my imagination at some point. You know, so the advice that I would give them is never to give up on yourself, no matter what you're going through, and always be bigger than your circumstances, no matter what you're going through, because everything comes to pass at some point. It's how you use that shit to empower yourself. Like with me, I made my weakness my strength. I made the fact that I was illiterate and that I am not good at reading. I couldn't read the power behind what pushes my movement every day. So I don't have to be embarrassed by that. I know individuals who still can't read or write on a second grade reading level, but are ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of that because I made it my strength by speaking it out into the universe, letting people know that this is part of my weakness. That same weakness became the power behind my movement. I done network with people all across the nation at this point over that same weakness. So I always, you know, make your weakness your strength and never let your circumstances become you, become bigger than your circumstances.
We know about the program. While we're talking about literacy, we do want to also speak about the library who started in Attica.
I didn't start a library in Attica. I was fortunate enough to donate over 500,000 books to Rikers Island, which actually bring birth to two different libraries on Rikers Island. However, it was empowered by the people. You know, without the people, I couldn't do it. Only thing I did was put the energy out into the universe and the people reciprocated the energy. And what I did was just push it back into purpose. But it was the power is all in the people. And when the people reciprocate your energy, you just got to do the right thing with it. And I feel like when people see you doing the right thing, when they pour into you, it just keep on connecting the dots. Like that's how it worked for me. Like a lot of times, I don't know how I'm gonna go forward, how I'm gonna get to the next stage of what I'm trying to achieve. I know as long as I stay on the right side of things, that's what my grandmother told me that before she died. She said, John, just stay on the right side of things, you know? And that's all I try to do now. Like just try to stay on the right side of things. Like I'm not perfect or nothing, but I try to stay on the right side of things. And yeah. Yeah.
We are incredibly proud of you. Yes, everybody. And
That's what I was going to. Yeah, I was going to ask you to tell them your website.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, how can they find you? Instagram.
If you follow me on Instagram, it's the real John Bunn. But me and Krista is really working on this book right now. This is like the biggest thing for me. I feel it's going, be really empowering, and I'm really going, open my soul up and put everything in it. I make my life an open book, and I just look forward to you guys helping me promote in the future. Thank you for being here today in the storm, all the crazy weather and all the warnings and everything. And the biggest thing for me right now is like going to the next level with it, as far as like it's putting a book out into the universe so it could be bigger than me. It's not really about me. It's a lot of individuals who's dealing with all different circumstances. But I feel like I need to produce this book to get back to the people, and I don't know where it's gonna go from there. But that's like my biggest step that I really want to achieve, and I'm just glad to be in the right realms of people that can help me achieve that at this point. The nonprofit is a voice for the unheard. I have a website. You can look me up at www.avoice4unheard. We always taking book donations. It's always, if you ever have any books that you want to throw away, I don't ask for money. I don't want no one's money. Everything that's done through my organization is pocketed and financed through me. I don't take grants. I don't write for any of these stuff from the government. I do it because I want to do it from my heart. And that's how my organization is set up. People often ask, do we take money donations and all that? I don't want money donations. My donations that I ask you, if you have them, if you have any extra books that you want to give away, send them in. I need them, and that's what I'm about.
Thank you for sharing. And Kristin, you as well. How can we support you?
Well, we do a lot of work with the Georgetown Juvenile Justice Clinic and Initiative. We've been representing children. We are reaching our 50th anniversary this year. And we not only do direct representation for children in the city who've been accused of crime and delinquency, but we also have a racial justice initiative. And our racial justice initiative provides training, resource development, legislative advocacy, research and writing. Our racial justice fellow, Alina Tulla, is in the room. Woo! Our research assistant, Adia Robinson, is here. One of our staff attorneys, our Prettyman fellow, Kelsey Robinson, is here. And so we actually, believe it or not, we do take donations. We do, although we are at a law school, people don't realize we are a legal services outfit. within a law school environment. So we are a 501c3, and all of our donations go directly to the work that we describe here. Our racial justice fellow gets paid that way. We have staff attorneys on staff who do nothing but the initiative work and represent clients. So that's our work. Easy to find us, Georgetown Juvenile Justice Clinic and Initiative, or Kristin Henning, and you can find us there.